Christians are nothing but a bunch of hypocrites. All they care about is your money. And I can't believe you became one of them. Is what my Buddhist dad said to me when I became a Christian. He would have disowned me for it, but him and my mom split, and he wasn't around anyways to disown me, so it wasn't that big of a difference. But he was disappointed. He wanted to know that he was disappointed in me. At that time, he did not know any Christians at all, and the only Christians that he knew of were the televangelists on TV who were going through all these scandals. This is like the 80s. You know who I'm talking about. You know, the guys in the white suits and with the wives with the eyelashes that go like that. And that's all he knew about Christians. Send your money in and Jesus will do something for you. And he's like, Christians are a bunch of hypocrites. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And then I transferred to Bible college. I told my dad, I'm going into the ministry. Again, that really disappointed him. And he said, I can't believe you're throwing away your life. We gave you this opportunity. We were refugees from Vietnam, worked 2 jobs, get you an education, and you want to throw it away by becoming a pastor. Now, of course, he only knew pastor like the guys on TV. Then he started thinking about it. He said, well, at least you'll make a lot of money. You'll be rich. That's probably not bad. And I said, Dad, I'm sorry to disappoint you again, but I'm not going to be that type of pastor. I'm going to be a church planter and I'm going to be poor for a while. Sorry, Dad. What's my story? Picture my family. This is my wife, Carrie, over there. We live in Southern California. 3 kids. I was born in Vietnam. I'm going to show you a picture of the day I arrived in America. It's actually news footage. This is our family. We were the first Vietnamese family, refugee family, to resettle in the state of Washington. And that little baby right there in my mom's arms is me. I was a year old, and our whole family came over, and we were the very first refugees of the war to come over and resettle in the state of Washington. It got too cold, and a few years later, we moved to Southern California. But that's a picture of my family. The sermon series is called What's Your Story? So let me tell you a little bit about my story. My story is really simple. You could probably relate to it. I could give it to you in one line, and the line is this. My story is that I am a sinner who is loved by God. That's my story. I'm a sinner. I'm really good at it. I didn't have to practice. It just came naturally. I don't even have to try hard to sin. It just happens. I know. I'm just good at it. It's just natural. I'm unfaithful to God. I turn my back on God. I'm ungrateful. I get stuck in negative thought patterns that leads to negative behavior patterns. I don't keep my commitments to God. You know how that line in that hymn goes? Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. I feel like I penned those words. I fail constantly. I turn my back on God. I get stuck, and I feel like I'm wandering half the time. And that's part of my story. The other part of this story is that even though I am a terrible sinner, I'm also greatly loved by an amazing God. That this God, even though I am running away from him, this God pursues me because he loves me. I have no idea why. This God loves me so much, he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross as my substitute for my sin. I don't know why. And even when I get stuck in these negative patterns, he tries to pull me out of it. Even when I'm running away from him, he actually chases after me to bring me back home. And he helps me get back on track. That's part of my story. One of the ways God uses to get me back on track is actually just through reading the Bible. And I especially, when I'm in these, wandering, lost moments or episodes in my life. I love reading the Gospels, and especially the words in red, the words of Jesus. If you read the Gospels, what you'll find is this. You'll see Jesus, he actually doesn't teach a whole lot. You see him doing a bunch of stuff and then asking a lot of questions. Now, he's teaching us in his questions, but in most of his dialogues, you notice he's asking questions. In the Gospels, it's actually recorded that he asked 307 questions. So I reflect on these questions. And I feel like when I read a portion of Scripture and Jesus is asking a question, I feel like he's asking me. So this is what I want to do. I want to share with you my 5 of my favorite questions that Jesus asks in the Bible, in the Gospels. Actually, one of them is in Revelation. But 5 life-changing questions. And the reason why I call them life-changing is the questions that we're going to cover. Jesus asked very specific people who were stuck in a bad place in their life, and he asked them a question. Or he asked a question to people who just failed and they're discouraged and they want to give up. And he asked them a question, and those questions became a catalyst to life change. So 5 life-changing questions. What I want to do is this. To make this more practical and relevant to you, I want you to think, maybe put yourself in the place of those people in the Bible in which Jesus is asking these questions to. And give it some context. Think about maybe an area, this is for you to apply these questions in a very specific way to make it helpful. Where are you currently stuck? Maybe think about an area that you're struggling in. Maybe an area that you feel like you've failed in. Or maybe an area of your life that you really want God to be at work in. You know, that there's this place that you feel like you need a miracle. You need God to show up in this area. Think about a specific area. Maybe it's your marriage, that you want God to show up in your marriage to help you raise those kids, who are just making dumb choices. Maybe you want God to show up in your finances, in your business, and you're struggling. Or maybe there's something going on in your soul and your heart that you're struggling with resentment, or you're struggling with despair, or hopelessness, or fear. You're afraid. You're full of fear. So where would you like to see God work? Think about that area, and then let's apply these 5 life-changing questions to that specific area. First question that Jesus asked, or I'd like you to think about, is this. Do you really want to get well? Do you really want to get well? This story, this passage comes from John chapter 5. It's a story of Jesus healing this man by the pool of Bethsaida. Some version says Bethesda. But there was this pool, a small little pool in Jerusalem, that there were rumors that these waters were healing waters. That when the waters get stirred up, the first person that jumps into the pool after the water gets stirred up gets their prayer answered and their ailments healed. That was a rumor. We don't know if it's true or not, but there was hundreds of people who were sick and lame and blind, waiting, hoping that they will be healed. Jesus comes around, he looks around, he sees this pool. And let me read this verse. One who had been an invalid for 38 years. Okay, a couple things here. The word invalid. Invalid. Somehow, he was probably a paraplegic or quadriplegic, he was paralyzed somehow. But for some reason, the people thought of him as less valid, less human, less worth than healthy people. So, not only is he physically damaged, there's damage in his emotions, in his heart, and his soul, because they're saying he's invalid. And he's been in that situation for 38 years. That's a long time. Who's in this room? Raise your hand if you're 38 years old or younger. Right? Your whole life. Imagine you were sick and people thought you were invalid because of your ailment. Imagine that. Imagine the emotions. Your whole life. You grew up with that. Imagine what that does to you mentally. Now, Jesus could have came up to anyone. There's hundreds of people around this pool. He was like, who should I talk to? And he's thinking, who is like the lamest, most pitiful person here? Boom, it's you. That guy looks like he's in need. Let me go talk to him. Jesus goes up to this person who's been there the longest and asks this question: do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? If I was with Jesus, I would say, Jesus, that's kind of insensitive. He just showed up. He's been here 38 years at the healing pool. I think he wants to get well. Of course he wants to get well, Jesus. Why do you have to ask that question? Well, Jesus knows the heart of men better than we do. Because you know as well as I do, some people, just because they have a problem doesn't actually mean, it doesn't mean that because a person has a problem, it doesn't mean that they actually want that problem solved. You probably know people facing addiction or other problems that are reoccurring, and they somehow accepted that problem in their life. Because you cannot live with a problem for 38 long years without accepting it and compensating for this problem, and it becomes part of your identity. Jesus asked him this question: do you want to get well? Now, if he really wanted to get well, he would have said, yes, Lord, make me whole. You don't know how much I want to get well. But that's not what this man said. This is what he said. He starts to complain and blame others. He says, sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred, and when I'm trying to get in, someone pushes me out of the way and goes down ahead of me. And she's like, I didn't ask you the question about why you're not healed. I want to ask you the question, do you want to get well? He said, no. But you see, Jesus, it's really not my fault. You know what it is these people here, they're so selfish. They know I've been waiting, and they just keep cutting in line. So, Jesus, it's really not my fault. And, I don't know. I don't know how to answer your question, but let me tell you why these people are so bad and why this is the thing. And he starts to blame and complain, and he never answers that question, do you want to be made well? Now, let me tell you, Jesus is asking me and you that same question. Do you really want to get well? Do you really want a better marriage? Do you really? Jesus is like, I can make that happen. It's going to be a process. You might not like the process, but I can make that happen. Right? Because this guy who was sick, who was this paralyzed man, it was part of his identity. You heard that phrase, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Like, change would be radical for his life, because guess what happens? If he's healed, he can't beg for money anymore, and he has to go and get a job. He's thinking, I don't know how to type. I got to update my resume. I don't know what type. How am I going to make a living if I'm well? So I don't know if I want to change. Because even though I'm in this problem, it's a problem I've known and a problem I accepted. And you've seen people in a bad relationship. You've seen people in other bad situations. And they're like, it's bad, but, I don't know if I actually want to change, God to actually do something, because change is hard. So do you really want to get well? Do you want a better marriage? Do you really want a better marriage? You complain about sleeping on the couch, but do you really want God to bring healing there? Do you really want a better relationship with your children where they actually respect you? Do you really want that? Because God's like, hey, I can make that happen. You might not like the process, but I can make that happen. If you really want it, do you really want to stop being so angry and full of resentment? Do you really want that? So I can make that happen. I can really make that happen, but you have to really want it. Part of the problem is we say we want to get well, but we really don't want God to radically change our lives. We want God to remove some of the pain and discomfort, but we actually don't want God to radically change us. In our church, we have this statement. We say this all the time. That dissatisfaction is the catalyst for change. That if you've accepted your situation, if that you cannot change the problem that you're willing to endure. If you're willing to endure this problem, you're never going to see change. So do you want to get well? Is the first question. Do you want to break your sinful habits? Do you want to stop living for yourself? And do you really want God to use your life to make a difference? Do you really want that? Do you want to get well? That's the first question. Second question is this. Why are you still so afraid? Why are you still so afraid? In Mark chapter 4, there's a story of Jesus on the Sea of Galilee in a storm, in a boat in a storm, and Jesus is asleep. The disciples are scared. They're thinking they're going to die. So they wake Jesus up and they say these words. Teacher. They call him teacher. They don't call him Lord. They call him teacher, just rabbi, like Sunday school teacher. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? Don't you care if we drown? You notice what they say. First, number one, they call him teacher. They don't recognize him as Lord yet. And they don't question his ability. They question his heart, his goodness, his love. Don't you care? He didn't say, why don't you stop the storm? They didn't say that. They said, don't you care about us? And you and I do the same thing. They were afraid. When you're in this situation where you're fearful, you start to question not God's ability, but you question God's love. We do it because we're afraid. Every time we get scared, we say, God, Lord, don't you care that I'm struggling in my finances? Lord, don't you care that my children are making stupid choices? Don't you care that my marriage is in trouble? God, don't you care? Don't you care that all those people are saying all these mean things about me? Lord, don't you care? And Jesus asked, why are you still so afraid? This is what the story goes on. It says, Jesus got up, rebuked the wind and the waves, and he says, quiet, be still. And the wind and waves actually listen to Jesus. He kind of puts them in a timeout. The wind dies down, and it was completely calm. Like, how long does it take for the waves to die down after the wind goes away? That takes a long time. But it was completely calm, and Jesus puts the storm in a timeout. Like, I can't do this to my children. Like, quiet. Dad says, quiet, be still. Didn't you hear me? They don't even listen to me. But Jesus is putting the storm in a timeout, and it freaks everyone out. And this is what they say. And then he says to his disciple, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? You're so afraid. You're questioning my goodness, my love for you. Do you not know who I am? Do you not know who's in your boat? You're questioning me because you're fearful? And this is the next slide. Next verse will tell us why they actually were afraid, because they actually did not know who he was. It says they were terrified and they asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him. Like, I thought he was a Sunday school teacher. It's a rabbi. Who is this guy? Jesus is like, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Do you not know who I am? So he's asking you, why are you still so afraid? Why are you afraid about your finances? Why are you afraid about your job? What people say about you? Why are you afraid of that? Do you not know who's in your boat? Why are you so afraid? Second question. Third question is, why do you still doubt? Why do you still doubt? Luke 24 is a story about the resurrection, when Jesus appears to the disciples for the first time. On On Thursday, before he was crucified, during the Last Supper, he says, this is my body broken for you. This is my blood shed for you. And he says, the Son of Man must be arrested and crucified, but on the third day, don't worry, guys, on the third day, I'm going to be back. And he tells them this. They're in tragedy and despair. All the disciples run away when Jesus gets arrested. Only John was there at the crucifixion. They placed him in the tomb, and everyone was in despair. On the third day, early in the morning, the third day, the women come to check on the body of Jesus to actually, prepare his burial properly. And they meet Jesus, and they see the resurrected Jesus. Like, I thought he was a gardener. No, that was the Lord Jesus. They run back to the upper room to tell the disciples, you guys won't believe this. We saw the Lord. He's alive. And the disciples, a bunch of male chauvinists, they're like, was there any guys there that saw that? Or just you women? Because there's a reason why we don't let you testify in court here. Because, I don't know. And they didn't listen to the women. So as they were discussing, this is what happened. They were in the upper room. Doors were locked because they were afraid of the Romans. While they were still talking about this, Jesus stood among them. He appeared in their midst, walked through the door, locked door somehow, and he said to them, peace be with you. Shalom. How you guys doing? Shalom, like nonchalantly. Of course, this freaked some out. They were afraid. It's like, Obi-Wan Kenobi Force ghost appears to them. It says they were startled and they were frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. Like, oh my goodness, it's a ghost. We thought you died. And Jesus said to them, why are you troubled? Why do doubts rise in your mind? Like, why are you so troubled? Why are you still doubting? And he allows them to touch him. He says, look at my hands. Look at my feet. It is I myself touch and see. This is where they pierced me. It's me. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as I have. Later he sits down. He eats a big old fish sandwich in front of him. Like, look at this. This is real. I'm going to eat this fish sandwich and make sure you know I'm real. Right? Ghosts don't eat. And afterwards, he said to them, this is what I told you while I was with you. Everything must be fulfilled that was written about me in the law and the prophets, the law of Moses and the prophets, and in the Psalms. And he's saying, guys, this is a Sunday. I told you on Thursday this was going to happen. You remember that? On Thursday, I said they're going to come and arrest me, but it's okay, guys. I'm going to rise. On Thursday, this had to happen. Why do you still doubt? You know why they were doubting? Because they're going through grief and tragedy. And when you're going through grief and tragedy, you struggle with, you forget things. You forget. These disciples, they're experiencing so much grief, they forgot that Jesus turned water into wine. They forgot Jesus walking on the waters. They forgot the feeding of the 5,000. They forgot the casting out the demons and the raising of Lazarus. And they forgot the Last Supper, where he told them this was going to happen. And they forgot. And this is what Jesus was trying to say to them. I am who I said I was. And I'm going to do everything I promised to you I will do. And that's what faith is. Faith is having confidence that God is who he says he is and that he'll do everything he promised that he will do. And why do you still doubt? A lot of times the reason why we doubt is because we're going through a hard time and we're facing tragedy. And in our tragedy, we forget the character of God and the promises of God. Why do you still doubt? Third question. Fourth question is this. Do you really love God? Or Jesus asking, do you really love me? The story comes from John chapter 21. I love this story, one of my favorite stories. A story about Peter being reconciled to Jesus. You guys know the story of Peter? Peter was the loudmouth in the group. He was the leader. His name was Simon. Jesus says, I'm going to call you Peter, Petros, meaning rock. You're going to be the foundation of this group. You're going to be the leader of this group. Peter, you're the guy I'm going to depend on. You're the rock. During the Last Supper, Jesus says, hey, this tonight, they're going to come arrest me. You guys are all going to scatter. You're going to run away. And Peter's like, interrupts Jesus in mid-speech. He's like, no, Jesus, I got to stop you. No, not I. Maybe these 11 jokers here, we're going to leave you, but not me. It's ride or die, Jesus, me and you, ride or die. I'm going with you. Jesus says, this very night you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. Not only are you going to fail me, you're going to fail me 3 times and in a few hours. You don't know what you're talking about. So he does that. He denies knowing Christ, runs away, wasn't even there at the crucifixion. Jesus, before he died, he said this. He says, wait for me in Jerusalem. Wait for me. Right? Don't run away. But guess what Peter does? He doesn't stay in Jerusalem. He goes back to Galilee. Jerusalem's in the south. He goes all the way to the north of the country, Galilee, where he's from. Not only that, he looks for his old fishing boat. He says, hey, I put this fishing boat on Craigslist. Maybe no one bought it. Let me get my fishing boat back. He goes and he gets into his same fishing boat, gets his same net, and he's fishing when Jesus told him, wait for me in Jerusalem. But what does Jesus do? Jesus pursues Peter to Galilee. Stands on the same shore in which 3 years earlier he called Peter to come follow him. And he calls out to Peter, you guys catch anything? He's like, no. Throw it on the other side. They do it. They throw the net on the other side. They catch they hit a big school of fish. Peter never, and in Peter's mind, I saw this before. Jesus did this miracle before. About 2 years ago, he did this. And he says, it is the Lord. He jumps into the water. He's like, forget the fish. He jumps into the water, and he swims back to Jesus, and he's thinking, oh, my goodness. I bet you Jesus is going to lay into me. He probably still has that whip from the money changers. He's probably going to like, oh my goodness, I blew it. But he runs to Jesus. And Jesus, when he appears on the shore, you know what Jesus has? Jesus got rocks and wood and he made a fire. Made his own bread. Roasted, broiled some fish for them. And this is what he says. First words Jesus says to him. Not, why, I told you were going to fail me. He doesn't say that. He doesn't even bring it up. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to him, and he did the same with the fish. She says, guys, how you guys doing? I haven't seen you guys in a while. I made you breakfast. How you like your fish? I'm going to broil it. You want tartar sauce on it? What do you want? And if I'm Peter, I'm thinking, like, he's feeling shame. He's a failure. He's thinking, I'm not speaking before he does. I'm not saying anything. Like, he's just eating quietly. After they finish eating, when they finished, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. It's the first time Jesus calls Peter by his real name, Simon. Remember? He says, I'm going to call you Rock from now. I'm going to call you Petros, Peter. But now here, Jesus calls Peter by his old name because he's living like his old self. This is fisherman Peter. This is not disciple apostle Peter. This is Simon, son of John. Simon, son of John. And you notice what he asked him. He says, Simon, I just want to know one thing. Do you love me more than these? And he says, more than these. Maybe he pointed to the lake and the boats and the net. And he says, do you love me more than these? Like you left the ministry to go back to the lake. Or do you love me more than these other disciples that you said that you love me more, and they're like, what is it? Do you love me? And you notice what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't bring up Peter's failure. He doesn't say, I told you so. Why did you fail me? He doesn't do any of that. He says, Peter, I just want to know one thing. I don't care about all that stuff. I don't care about your failure. I don't care about your lack of character and you break your... we could deal with that, but I just want to know one thing. I want to know if you really loved me. He asked him 3 times. Peter says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. I said, good, follow me. I could work with that. At the end of the day, that's the question that God wants to ask you. Do you really love him? Not, what did you do for me lately? Not, what did you put in the offering bucket? Not, did you do this thing? No, I just want to know if you love me. So let's review these questions. See how well you did. Okay, see if this is a test. Do you really want to get well? Why are you still so afraid? Why do you still doubt? And do you really love God? Now, if you're me, if you're honest answering these questions, I would say, man, I'm not doing well at this job interview. I wouldn't, this is not good. I cannot answer these questions sufficiently. You know why? It's because I'm a sinner. Just like Peter was a sinner, just like you are sinners. As sinners, we all sin. Sinners sin, that's what we do. We question God, we don't trust God, we doubt him, we don't have faith, we're unfaithful. As sinners, we fail God every day. It's part of our story. The bad news is that not only do we sin, we deserve to be punished for our sin. But the good news is that God loves us. Even though we're terrible sinners, we're loved by an amazing God. We're greatly loved by an amazing God. And even in our worst failure, Jesus comes and he chases us down and he meets us on that shore. And he says, do you want to come and eat with me? I made you breakfast. Leads us to our 5th question. 5th question is, will you invite Jesus inside? Will you invite Jesus inside? Revelation 3:20, Jesus is speaking to a church of Laodicea. He says, this church here, you guys, I know your deeds, you're rich. You think you're doing well, you're comfortable. But you are lukewarm. You're comfortable, you're lukewarm. And he says this to them, here I am, behold, I stand at the door of your life, of your heart, and I'm knocking. He's talking to Christian people. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. And Jesus is saying, guys, I just want to come in and sit down and have a meal with you. You know, I want to sit down and have a meal with you. The thing that gets me is Jesus is talking to a group of Christians somehow that this church has locked Jesus outside of their lives. They still had church services, but Jesus wasn't invited into their lives. I used to not think that could be possible, but now looking at my life, I do it all the time. I go to church. I never miss church. There's a lot of times Jesus is not in my life, and I locked him out. And Jesus is knocking. He's saying, would you just invite me in? Because this is what I want to do. I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to remind you of your sin and failure. I want to sit down and eat with you. I made a meal. And this meal that I'm going to bring you, it's going to satisfy your soul. The aroma is going to fill the air. And when you eat it, it's going to cause your soul to sing. The good news is that Jesus is not bringing over broiled fish, because I don't like broiled fish. This meal that's going to satisfy your soul is bread and wine. Will you let me in? I brought bread and wine. My body broken for you, and my blood shed for you, for the forgiveness of your sins. I want to come in and eat with you, and you with me. This is my story. And Jesus is asking, will you invite me inside? So, my story is that I'm a sinner. I'm really good at it. I'm unfaithful. I'm a terrible sinner that is greatly loved by an amazing God. He continues to pursue me, even in the midst of my sin, in the midst of me running away. He chases me down, and he just wants to share a meal with me. He says, I want to sit down. I want to give you breakfast. I want to give you bread and wine. Can I just come inside? It's been a while. That's my story. I actually think it's your story too. This is all of our stories. Story of God pursuing people that he loves. So when was the last time you invited Jesus to come into the core of your heart, to love you and to satisfy your soul? I didn't ask you when was the last time you came to church, because you probably came to church last week. When's the last time you let Jesus love you, to serve you? I didn't ask you when was the last time you served Jesus. When was the last time you invited him in and let him serve you a soul-satisfying meal? Will you let Jesus in? So let's go over those questions. Do you want to get well? Why are you so afraid? Why do you still doubt? Do you really love me? And will you let me in? Questions that Jesus is asking us.